Carl Jung once said that the first half of life is devoted to forming a healthy ego, and the second half is about going inward and letting go of it. And I think that that's the perfect theme that's going to guide the direction of our chat today. Because along the path to radically simplifying my life, I learned that becoming a better version of yourself isn't always about doing or adding more to your life, but it's also about identifying and removing the things that are holding you back. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about the things I had to let go of or stop doing to level up my life across 4 key aspects of wellness. So while the stories and lessons that I'm sharing are deeply personal to me, my hope is that you'll also be able to walk away from this video with a few tips and ideas on how you can transform your life for the better as well. Hi there and welcome to my channel. My name is Marissa and this is A to Zen Life, where I talk about the A to Z of simplifying your way to a life you love. So if that sounds like something that you'd be interested in, be sure and hit the subscribe button and we can dive into the first thing I stopped doing to level up mentally, which was consuming toxic content. And I think that this is one of those things that we don't even notice how much it's happening or it's pulling us down because of the way that news and social media are set up nowadays to constantly be pushing topics on us that are meant to get a reaction. And oftentimes more and more, it seems like the reaction that they're trying to get is negative, where they're kind of rage baiting people. And then the way that the algorithms are set up, the more that you engage with this kind of negative content, the more this kind of negative content gets pushed upon you even further. And this can very easily spiral into something that drains your time as well as your positive energy. And I found that not only does this make me feel bad mentally, emotionally, and sometimes even physically, but it also seems like the more of this kind of content that I am exposed to and consume, the more I draw these kinds of negative and toxic people and situations into my life. A few years back, I was decluttering my entire home, and that kind of culminated in me selling, donating, or giving away over 90% of what I owned. And part of that meant that I was selling things on eBay and also selling or giving away a lot of stuff on Facebook Marketplace. And around the same time, I was also reading a lot of stuff on Reddit, particularly this one subreddit that was called Choosing Beggars. And I noticed that the more I read stories from the Choosing Beggars subreddit, the more I was attracting these entitled, horrible, rude people into my life. You know how Khalees says that her milkshake brings all the boys to the yard? Well, you would not believe how free stuff brings the Choosing Beggars to the yard. I had people who expected me to deliver things to them for free. They wanted no responsibility for picking it up themselves and expected me to take time out of my day and spend gas money to drive it to them, sometimes up to 1 or 2 hours away, which how does that even make sense? Even when I was selling things, I would find that people would be lowballing me these ridiculous offers, but the moment that I cut out my consumption of that Choosing Beggars subreddit, I started to notice less and less of these kinds of people showing up into my life. And now I'm really careful to try and filter out toxic or negative content in other ways. Like if I'm scrolling on Instagram or YouTube and something pops up, very clickbaity, toxic content that I don't want to see in my feed, I will hit the button to block or unfollow that kind of content or that person so that I don't feel tempted to consume their content and I don't fall down this rabbit hole. Before we move on to the rest of the list, I just want to give a quick shout out to thank BetterHelp for sponsoring today's video and for helping me level up my life with therapy that teaches me how to stay positive, grounded, and grateful in a world that is constantly trying to drag us down and make us feel bad about ourselves. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service and it's 100% online. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. To get started, all you have to do is answer a few questions about your needs and preferences in therapy so that BetterHelp can match you with the right therapist from their network, usually within 48 hours. After that, you can chat with your therapist at a time and in a way that's most convenient to you, whether that's through a phone call or a video chat or even by messaging them. And if your therapist isn't the right fit for any reason, you can switch to a new therapist at no additional charge. Right now, you can save 10% off your first month of therapy by going to www.betterhelp.com/A2ZenLife or click the link that I've shared down in the description box and pinned comment below. And thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring today's video. The next thing I had to quit doing to level up was I had to stop doing things with a passive mindset. Part of leveling up means that you need to keep yourself open to opportunities to learn new skills, or to acquire more knowledge, or to grow in some way. And I realized that I was missing out on a lot of learning time when I was doing passive or automatic or repetitive activities. So for example, when I used to commute over an hour for my job as a hospital speech language pathologist, there was an hour that I was on the road thinking random thoughts about nothing in particular. But what I did instead was I turned that into an opportunity for me to learn Chinese. And that meant that each day while I was driving, I was getting an hour there and an hour home that would otherwise have been completely wasted learning a new skill, which was Mandarin Chinese. And nowadays, as a busy mom, on a daily basis, there are plenty of opportunities where I can take something that is repetitive and automatic that needs to be done in my home, and I can turn that into an opportunity to actively engage my mind and learn something new by putting in my AirPods and listening to an audiobook. And I have gone through so many audiobooks like this and learned so much, and it actually makes me look forward to these chores that I would otherwise probably dread doing. So as you go through your day, take a look and see if there are any opportunities where you can take these times where you're just doing something that would otherwise be done passively and turn it into an opportunity to learn something fun and engaging. The third thing that I had to quit doing on this list was very uncomfortable, but also very necessary for me, and that was shrinking myself to fit in. And I think that a lot of people also find this to be true when they start growing and leveling up. They begin to outgrow these places that they fit into in the past, but then they're also very uncomfortable with moving on because it feels unfamiliar and kind of stretching to them. And I found myself in this situation many times, whether it was jobs, or friendships or relationships, where I was kind of trying to keep myself small because I was afraid of change, or I didn't want to rock the boat or make people upset or whatever. But you're not doing yourself any favors if you try to shrink yourself and stay small to continue fitting into places that you've outgrown. And one book that I found that was really, really helpful with this is the book The Power of Vulnerability by Brené Brown, and I will make sure to link that down below for you to check out. It's only available as an audiobook, so keep that in mind. But there's this whole section where she talks about fitting in versus belonging that I think is incredibly helpful for helping people navigate this topic. So the next item on this list of things I quit doing was I quit pushing myself to be more feminine. And I kind of feel like this is going to be a really unpopular opinion because I've noticed that nowadays there are so many channels that are making videos on content about how to be more elegant, how to be more feminine, how to be a high value woman and attract a high value man. I have nothing against those channels, let me first just say that. But also I don't think that you need to necessarily push yourself to be more feminine if that's just not authentically you. My mother passed away when I was 9 years old, leaving me to be raised by my father, and I became quite the little tomboy. And I feel like this is something that caused me a lot of guilt because I got told a lot how my mother was such a fashionable person, and she always had her makeup and her hair and her outfits nicely done, and she was very feminine. And I was playing all the sports. I wore glasses. I always had my hair in a ponytail. I was most of the time covered in mud or dirt. And I had people who would kind of subtly say, why can't you be more like your mother? Why can't you be more ladylike? But that just wasn't me. I even wore shorts underneath my prom dress to go to the prom because I felt so uncomfortable in dresses back then. And then when I went to college and I would go out with my friends, all of them would get dressed up in like bodycon dresses, and I would be in like a pair of jeans and a nice top because all I wanted to do was dance. And they would say to me, Marissa, why don't you dress nicer? You're never gonna find a man looking like that. But the joke's on them because I landed a 10 out of 10 smoke show husband without feeling like I needed to change my personality or dress more feminine. So don't feel pressured to try to be more feminine if that's not who your authentic self is, because you can still be happy and successful and feel good in your own skin without doing that. The next thing on this list I had to quit doing was not having a routine. It wasn't until a few years after I had moved out on my own that I realized just how important it is to have a daily routine. Quite often I would stay up until 2 or 3 a.m. reading books or watching animes, and then feel terrible when I had to wake up early in the morning to go to work or go to my college classes. And then also because I wasn't on a sports team anymore, I didn't have anyone that was holding me accountable or telling me that I needed to exercise, so I just wouldn't. And then I felt really bad because I wasn't moving my body. Over time, I slowly came to realize how important it was for me to be able to have a consistent and predictable routine. And I built habits like making the bed every morning, getting up and doing some light exercises, drinking a glass of water after I do those exercises so that I'm well hydrated to start my day. And the great thing about having a routine is it almost becomes a muscle memory that you don't even have to activate your brain to do, because you just get into the habit of doing this sequence of things in order each day. And that's really seeped into almost every aspect of my life and helped me build routines around sleep, eating, exercise, and keeping my home clean and tidy. So if you're someone who's more go with the flow and hasn't figured out a routine yet, I would definitely encourage you to try to look at the lifestyle that you want to achieve and build a routine that's going to make it easier for you to achieve it. Another thing I stopped doing is I stopped participating in diet culture. And I grew up in the 80s, and then I was a teenager in the 90s, and there was a lot of pressure to be thin back in those days. You had Kate Moss, who was like, I think 100 pounds soaking wet, and this heroin chic, waif thin body type was super, super popular. Throughout high school, it didn't bother me as much because I was on several athletic teams. I got a lot of exercise, and it was very, very easy for me to eat whatever I wanted and not gain weight. But then when I went to college and I gained the freshman 15, I started this cycle of binge eating and yo-yo dieting that was very, very tough to get out of. And I think a lot of women fall into this pattern where they'll diet and they'll lose a little bit of weight, but then because they haven't truly healed their relationship with food, then they'll kind of go back to their old habits and put the weight back on, or maybe even more weight, and then start a new diet, and then the whole cycle will repeat itself over again. So for the sake of my body and my peace of mind, I had to stop participating in diet culture, and instead what I focus on is being more intuitive with my body and the things that I'm eating, and it's more about balance and moderation than dieting. Moving on to some of the things I had to quit doing to level up socially, the first one is I had to stop ignoring people's red flags. I used to be a really big pushover, and I was quite naive and always wanted to believe the best of everyone. But time and time again, I found myself in situations where I would either be taken advantage of or hurt somehow by people who had been flashing me clear warning signs all along. There was one girl who had been my best friend growing up throughout elementary school and who had moved away, and then I reunited with her when she moved back to my hometown. And as we were catching up, she was kind of telling me about how she had fallen on all these hard times. Her family had disowned her. She had gotten kicked out of her apartment because her roommate took her money and didn't pay their rent on time. She didn't have a place to stay, and her daughter was taken away by CPS. And I was too naive to realize it at the time, but all of these things were a pretty big red flag that something was going on, but she was constantly playing the victim, and it was always other people's fault and never her own. Later, I realized that she probably had a narcissistic personality disorder, and she was a huge manipulator. But I had to experience that myself when she literally stole from me, stole money, stole clothes, and and even tried to steal my identity by taking my driver's license, and would have gotten away with it if she hadn't been caught at the bar by my old high school swim coach. So nowadays I'm a lot more aware of these kinds of red flags, and I'm a lot quicker to set boundaries and remove myself from situations where I encounter people like this. Another thing that I had to stop doing was I had to stop avoiding conflict. And I think it's because, like I said, I was a people pleaser, and I had this idea in my mind that all conflict was bad and I wanted to avoid it at all costs. But the thing about conflict is sometimes conflict is healthy, and you have to be able to stand up for yourself and push back against people who are, so let's say, taking advantage of you, like that girl that I mentioned earlier, because she actually stole my driver's license a second time, and I had to go to her house and confront her to ask for it back. And that was very hard for me. I had to learn to do that to set boundaries and protect myself. So if you have a habit of conflict avoidance, getting over that can definitely take you to the next level. I also stopped feeling pressured to keep up with everything 24/7, whether that's the news or what my favorite influencers are doing on social media, and actually turning off notifications on my phone and not allowing Instagram notifications and YouTube notifications or even text messages when I'm trying to focus and get something done has been one of the best things that I've ever done, because all of those notifications and pop-ups were just constantly drawing my attention away from the things that I should be paying attention to, and it was really draining me of my time and peace. And I flipped my mindset so that instead of feeling FOMO, which is fear of missing out, now I feel JOMO, which is the joy of missing out. Moving on to the things that I quit to level up financially, the first thing I quit in this category was my full-time job. I used to work as a hospital speech-language pathologist, but that job was very stressful and strenuous in many ways, starting with the hour-long commute that I mentioned previously. And then on top of that, I was also the only speech-language pathologist in my unit at that hospital, and quite often my caseload was way beyond the amount of patients that one speech-language pathologist should be seeing. So I was under a lot of time pressure to see all of these patients and do the work needed to help them meet their goals, as well as the emotional pressure that I felt because I wanted them to get better as much as possible. But then after I'd been working there for almost 2.5 years, something happened that was very upsetting, which was my husband and I had gotten pregnant. We had been trying for a while, and I ended up having a miscarriage. And then after I had the miscarriage, my health was completely decimated. So because of the physical, emotional, and time demands of my job, I was having a hard time getting myself healthy again because I simply didn't have the time to devote to that. So my husband and I talked about it, and we decided that I would leave my full-time job. So I put in my 2-week notice and I left my full-time job. And after that, my main focus was on getting healthy again. And then I was just doing a little bit of consulting work and side hustles to make income on the side part-time. And it had always been the plan that when we had children, that I would stay home with the children until it was time for them to go to school, and then I would start working again. But what I realized when I started thinking about going back to work was it was going to be really hard for me to juggle motherhood and the demands of that while also having a full-time hospital job. And I'm someone who said they would never own their own business. Like, even when I was back in school and we were talking about paths for speech language pathology and careers, I said I would never own a private practice because I wanted to work for the man, and I never wanted the responsibility of working for myself. And yet I kind of fell into blogging and being a YouTuber, and it was one of the best things that could have ever happened to me, because now not only do I have the opportunity to make an income doing exactly what I love doing most, which is helping people simplify and declutter their lives, but I also have the flexibility to be the mom and the wife that I want to be. That is something that is just so priceless to me. So quitting my full-time job was unexpectedly one of the best things that could have ever happened to me. Another thing I quit doing to level up financially was I quit shopping for fun. I very much used to be someone who would just go shopping for fun, or because I had free time, or because I saw something on sale and I didn't want to miss out on a great deal. But I came to realize that that stuff wasn't just draining me financially, but it was also filling up my home with a bunch of excess stuff that I didn't need. So I stopped shopping for fun, and now I only shop when I have a genuine need or after I've really put some thought into buying something, and that has saved me so much money and kept so much clutter out of my home in the long run. And that kind of leads me to the next item on this list, which is I stopped putting so much value on stuff. Whenever I talk about this, there's always this one scene from American Beauty that kind of pops into my mind. And I know that a lot of people feel a certain way about American Beauty and Kevin Spacey, which we won't go into in this video because that's not the topic. So in this scene, Kevin Spacey and his wife are kind of having this moment of intimacy where they're reconnecting because they've been growing apart and more emotionally and physically distant for a while. And he's kind of bringing up their past and how they have been so in love and the kind of people that they used to be. And he's leaning in to kiss her. But his beer is about ready to spill onto the couch, and she looks over and sees it, and she kind of switches gears and just warns him off.
Lester, you're gonna spill beer on the couch.
And the moment is broken, and he loses his cool and actually gets mad, and he screams, "It's just a couch."
So what? It's just a couch.
This is a $4,000 sofa upholstered in Italian silk. This is not just a couch.
It's just our couch! This isn't life! This is just stuff.
And that scene always kind of stuck with me, and how we tend to place a lot of value on the stuff in our lives when really what we should be valuing are the people and the relationships and the experiences we have and things like that. So one of the things I did to level up was I stopped putting so much value on stuff, and I started putting more value on things like relationships and experiences in my life. And doing that has really leveled up my overall life satisfaction and happiness. And trust me, this is not something that came easily to me because I used to be a hoarder. I was a second generation hoarder, and my family put a lot of value on stuff. And if you want to find out more about that and some of the other life lessons that I've learned in the past 40 years, make sure to go check out this video, or I'll see you next week. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.